The atheist who woke up in the Umbral, a journey beyond death. When reality shattered, non-linear opening. 3 years after my death, I finally understand what happened. I'm now part of a spiritual rescue team, helping lost souls transition to the light. But my journey started in the darkest place imaginable, and I want to take you there. Present day, spiritual perspective. Today, I work alongside spiritual mentors in what Spiritist doctrine calls the rescue missions. We search for souls trapped in confusion, particularly those who, like I once was, refused to believe anything existed beyond the physical body. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent 45 years as a convinced materialist, mocking anyone who spoke of God, afterlife, or spiritual continuity. I attended a Spiritist center with my wife for years, but only as a social formality. While she listened to lectures about Allan Kardec's teachings inside the auditorium, I stayed outside, chatting and laughing with others. When you die, everything ends, I'd say confidently. I went to Catholic memorial masses purely for appearances. I was certain death was the ultimate period at the end of life's sentence. Flashback, the moment everything changed. But let me take you back to the moment my certainty crumbled. I remember watching my own body being prepared for burial, not from my eyes. Those eyes were closed forever. I was observing from somewhere else, floating, confused, terrified. The first thought that screamed through my consciousness was, "This is impossible. I don't exist anymore. This can't be happening." Dr. Raymond Moody, the American researcher who documented thousands of near-death experiences, describes this moment as the separation phase. But what I experienced went beyond a brief NDE. I wasn't coming back. This was permanent, and I had no idea what was happening to me. The disorientation was absolute. Was I alive, dead, hallucinating, trapped in some neurological misfire as my brain shut down? But I had no brain anymore. That organ was lying motionless in the body below me, yet I was thinking, feeling, experiencing raw terror. The descent into the Umbral. What happened next, I can only describe as falling through layers of consciousness. The funeral home faded, and I found myself in what I can only call a realm of shadows. In Spiritist philosophy, a doctrine that originated with French educator Allan Kardec in 1857, this place is called the Umbral. It's not hell in the biblical sense, but rather a lower vibrational zone where souls heavy with materialistic attachments, guilt, and spiritual ignorance naturally gravitate. For Americans unfamiliar with Spiritism, think of it this way. It's like a rehabilitation center for souls, not a place of eternal punishment. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has documented similar, distressing near-death experiences where people encounter dark, confusing realms. What I experienced aligns with those accounts, but extended far longer than the minutes or hours of clinical death. The Umbral had no solid ground, no clear sky, no horizons. Dense fog surrounded everything. Sounds echoed strangely. Moans, whispers, fragmented voices that seemed to come from inside my own consciousness. The temperature felt bitterly cold, not physically, but as if the cold emanated from within my soul itself. Then I saw them. Other figures moving through the mist. Some looked solid, others translucent. Faces twisted with confusion, fear, regret. Some wandered aimlessly. Others sat motionless, staring at nothing. A few seemed trapped in loops, repeating the same movements over and over, reaching for something, calling out names, reliving moments I couldn't understand. I tried to speak, to ask where I was, but my voice came out weak and distorted. One figure turned toward me, a woman whose eyes held such deep sorrow it pierced through my panic. She whispered, "You're one of us now. The ones who didn't believe, the ones who didn't prepare." The self-created hell. Here's what American psychologist Carl Jung understood about the unconscious mind. Our thoughts create our reality. In the Umbral, I learned this principle operates with terrifying literalness. Every fear I harbored materialized. Every denial I clung to became a chain. Every moment I had mocked spiritual seekers echoed back as evidence of my own blindness. The Spirit's book, Kardec's foundational text published in 1857, contains a passage I once read only to ridicule. Hell is not a place, but a state of the spirit separated from good. In that moment, surrounded by the manifestations of my own mental darkness, I understood. I wasn't being punished by an angry deity. I was experiencing the natural consequence of a lifetime spent building walls against anything beyond material existence. Edgar Cayce, America's most famous psychic, spoke of thought forms that persist after death. In the Umbral, these thought forms weren't metaphorical. They were the environment itself. My skepticism had become my prison. My certainty that nothing existed after death had ironically ensured I would exist in the worst possible state. Time behaved strangely there. What might have been minutes felt like years. What could have been days passed in what seemed like seconds. Without physical reference points, no sun, no clock, no biological rhythms, existence became a disorienting loop of confusion and growing despair. The first glimmer. Then something shifted. In the distance, though distance barely means anything in that realm, I perceived a faint light, not bright, not overwhelming, but present, different from the oppressive gray that surrounded everything else. And I heard a voice, gentle, patient, impossibly calm amid the chaos. You are not abandoned, you are not forgotten, but you must choose to see what you have denied. That voice, I later learned it belonged to a spiritual mentor assigned to watch over souls in my condition, sparked something I hadn't felt since awakening in that place, hope. For the first time since my death, a question formed that wasn't rooted in panic or denial. What if I was wrong about everything?
You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten.
That question, that tiny crack in my lifelong certainty, became the doorway. But the journey from question to understanding would require something I'd never been good at during my physical life: humility. Want to know what happened when I finally admitted I needed help? Stay with me.
Did you know that in the spiritual dimensions, there are entire teams dedicated to rescuing souls who can't accept they've died? I know this because I'm now part of one. But first, I had to be rescued myself. The encounter with spiritual rescuers, the light I had seen began to grow, and from it emerged two figures. They moved with purpose, but without hurry, as if they had all the time in existence, which, I suppose, they did. They wore simple garments that seemed to glow with their own subtle luminescence. But what struck me most wasn't their appearance. It was the feeling they radiated: peace, unconditional acceptance, love without judgment. The taller of the two spoke first. "Welcome, brother. You've been wandering in confusion, but your wandering has led you to this moment. Are you ready to understand?" My first instinct, even there, even after everything, was defensiveness. Understand what? That I was wrong? That you religious people were right all along? The bitterness in my non-physical voice surprised even me. The second figure, a woman with eyes that seemed to see through every wall I'd ever built, smiled gently. "This isn't about being right or wrong. It's about being lost or found. And right now, you're lost." Comparing experiences, American NDEs versus the Umbral. Many Americans are familiar with near-death experiences through books like Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody, or Proof of Heaven by Dr. Ibn Alexander. Those experiences typically involve a tunnel of light, deceased relatives welcoming you, a profound sense of peace, a life review, being sent back. My experience shared some elements, but differed in crucial ways. There was no immediate peace, no welcoming committee of deceased loved ones. Why? According to Spiritist philosophy, the quality of our afterlife experience directly reflects our spiritual preparation and the vibration of our consciousness at death. Dr. Moody's subjects often describe beautiful realms because many had some spiritual foundation. Belief in God, practice of love, ethical living. Even if they weren't conventionally religious, they had cultivated positive spiritual qualities. I had cultivated nothing but certainty in nothingness. And so, nothingness, or rather its psychological equivalent, is what I initially experienced. The spiritual rescuer explained. The umbral isn't punishment, it's a natural consequence. Water flows downward, heat rises upward. Consciousness gravitates toward the frequency it has cultivated. You spent a lifetime reinforcing materialistic thought patterns. When you shed your physical body, those patterns remained, and they created this environment.
The transition zone. They guided me to what they called a transition station, a region of the umbral that sits between the deepest zones of suffering and the higher spiritual colonies. Think of it as a spiritual emergency room where newly deceased souls receive initial orientation. The space looked like a large, simple hall filled with others in various states of confusion. Some sat quietly, processing. Others paced frantically. A few argued loudly that none of this was real, that they'd wake up soon. I recognized that last group. I'd been one of them moments before. Spiritual workers moved among us with infinite patience. I later learned many of them had once been atheists, skeptics, or materialists themselves. They understood our resistance because they had lived it. Questions Americans always ask. One of the spiritual instructors, a man who introduced himself as Marcus, formerly a philosophy professor from Boston, who died in 1923, addressed common questions. Is this purgatory? Not in the Catholic sense. The umbral isn't about awaiting judgment from an external God. It's about self-confrontation and re-education. There's no set timeline. You're here until you genuinely understand and grow. Is this hell? If hell means eternal, inescapable torment, no. If hell means experiencing the natural consequences of how you lived, yes, temporarily, but it's always escapable through genuine spiritual growth. Why didn't I see the tunnel of light? Many do, if their consciousness is oriented toward the light. Yours was oriented toward denial. The light was always there, but you couldn't perceive it until something shifted within you. The teaching begins. Over what seemed like weeks, though again, time operated strangely, I participated in what I can only describe as spiritual education classes. The curriculum covered 1. The law of cause and effect. Every action, thought, and intention generates consequences that follow the spirit across incarnations. This isn't punishment, it's physics applied to consciousness. And 2, the law of love, the fundamental organizing principle of the universe. Not romantic love, but something closer to what Greeks called agape, unconditional, universal compassion. 3, the nature of thought. In the spiritual realms, thought is creative force. What we think, we manifest. This is why the umbral reflected my mental state. It was literally composed of it. 4, the purpose of incarnation. Physical life is school. Earth is one of countless worlds where spirits learn through experience, challenge, and choice. I remembered Chico Xavier, the Brazilian medium whose psychographed books my wife had tried to get me to read. He had written extensively about these laws, channeling spirits who described exactly what I was now experiencing firsthand. The irony burned. I had mocked what turned out to be accurate descriptions of reality. The power of humility. But here's what shifted everything the moment I genuinely admitted, I don't know, I was wrong. Please teach me. Something fundamental changed. The oppressive weight I'd been carrying lifted slightly. The fog around me thinned. The faces of other souls I'd seen contorted in anguish suddenly looked less monstrous. I could see their humanity, their pain, their journey. Robson Pinheiro, a contemporary Brazilian medium, describes this phenomenon in his book, The Legion. Humility is the key that unlocks all spiritual doors. Pride, particularly intellectual pride, is the lock that keeps souls trapped in lower vibrations. My pride hadn't just been in thinking I was right about atheism. It was in my contempt for those who believed differently. It was in my certainty that I was smarter, more rational, more enlightened than the superstitious masses. That contempt had created the very prison I now inhabited, American spiritual perspectives. Dr. Brian Weiss, the American psychiatrist who documented past life regression, speaks of soul lessons. One of my soul lessons, apparently, was learning that genuine wisdom includes acknowledging the limits of one's knowledge, something I had spectacularly failed to do during my physical life. Edgar Cayce, in his readings, frequently emphasized that the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. I had inverted this. My flesh had been strong in certainty, but my spirit had been weak in openness. Community engagement moment. Before I continue to the final part of my journey, I want to ask you, what beliefs have you held with absolute certainty, only to later question them? For me, it took death to shatter my certainty. For you, I hope it takes less. Share in the comments. This isn't just my story. It's a conversation about how we all navigate belief, doubt, and discovery. If this is resonating with you, subscribe to the channel. We're building a community that explores these profound questions together, respecting all perspectives while seeking truth. Service and redemption, restructured ending. What if I told you that the spirits who help atheists transition are often former atheists themselves? That the best teachers of light are those who once lived in darkness? Let me show you how my greatest failure became my greatest purpose. The invitation to serve. After what might have been months in the transition zone, Marcus approached me with an unexpected proposal. You've made remarkable progress. You understand now what you couldn't see before, but understanding alone isn't enough. It must become action. We'd like to invite you to join a rescue team. Rescue team, I asked. Yes, you'll return to the denser regions of the Umbral, the places where you first awakened, but this time as a guide, not a prisoner. You'll help others who are where you once were. The thought terrified me. Return to that place? Face that darkness again? But Marcus smiled knowingly. Facing what we fear transforms it. You'll return not as a victim of the darkness, but as a bearer of light. The spiritual colonies. Before beginning rescue work, I was taken to what Spiritist literature calls a spiritual colony, a community of evolved spirits engaged in study, service, and continued growth. If the Umbral was a grayscale world of fog and confusion, this place was... I struggle to describe it even now. Colors had dimensions I'd never perceived. Sound carried emotional textures. The very air, if you can call it that, seemed alive with purpose and harmony. Chico Xavier's most famous psychographed work, Nosso Lar, Our Home, describes a spiritual colony in detail. Reading it during my physical life, I had dismissed it as fantasy. Living it, I recognized his description was remarkably accurate, though words inevitably failed to capture the experience. I met spirits who had been there for decades of Earth time, still studying, still growing. Some taught, some built. Yes, construction exists in spiritual realms, thought made manifest. Some composed music that seemed to heal the listener's soul. Some tended gardens that grew not from soil, but from intention. Understanding the broader picture. An instructor named Elena, who had been a scientist in New York in the 1950s before her transition, helped me understand the larger structure. The spiritual dimensions aren't binary, not just heaven and hell. There are countless levels, each corresponding to different states of consciousness. The umbral represents lower vibrational zones. This colony represents a mid-level. Higher realms exist that even we can barely perceive. And Earth itself is a school where spirits in physical bodies learn through limitation, challenge, and choice. This aligned with what mystics across cultures have described. Emanuel Swedenborg's spheres of heaven, the Buddhist concept of multiple realms, even Dante's gradations of paradise and inferno, all pointing toward a layered, developmental model of spiritual reality. The key, Elena continued, is that advancement isn't about judgment from an external God. It's about inner transformation. You don't earn your way to higher realms. You grow your way there. As your consciousness expands, you naturally resonate with higher vibrations, returning to the darkness. My first rescue mission was the hardest. 6 of us, all former skeptics or materialists, descended into a region of the umbral I'd not seen before. It was denser, darker, more chaotic than where I had awakened. We found a man, I'll call him James, who had been wandering for what he perceived as years. He was a former physicist who had died suddenly of a heart attack. His last conscious thought had been a calculation about quantum mechanics. He couldn't accept that he still existed because consciousness is just neurons firing, and my neurons are dead. I recognized his logic because it had been mine. His certainty was my former certainty. His prison was the one I'd built for myself. James, I said gently, I was you. I understand completely. But what if consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but rather filtered through it? What if you're experiencing the you that was always there, but temporarily housed in physical neurons? He looked at me with desperate hope, fighting against desperate fear. But that would mean everything I believed was incomplete. Not wrong, I clarified. Incomplete. The science you knew was accurate about the physical realm. But there are other realms, other dimensions that physical instruments can't measure. You're in one now. The transformation through service. Over time, and I've now participated in dozens of rescue missions, I discovered something profound. Helping others heal healed me. Each soul I guided toward the light illuminated something in my own consciousness. Divaldo Franco, a contemporary spiritist medium and lecturer, he's actually spoken at universities in the United States, teaches that service is the currency of the spiritual economy. You don't pay for your advancement with faith or ritual. You earn it through genuine love expressed as action. The souls I help aren't just atheists. We rescue religious fundamentalists trapped in their own rigid expectations, materialists like I was, those who died suddenly and refused to accept their death, souls weighed down by guilt, shame, or fear, even those who did terrible things and can't forgive themselves, the universal principle. Here's what I've learned that I wish I'd understood during my physical life. The universe is not indifferent, but it's also not judgmental in the way human religions often portray. It operates on principles, laws as reliable as gravity or thermodynamics, but applied to consciousness rather than matter. Love is not a feeling, it's the fundamental force. When you act from genuine love, compassion, service, selflessness, you rise in vibration. When you act from ego, selfishness, cruelty, indifference, you lower in vibration. It's not moral judgment, it's spiritual physics. Death doesn't make you instantly wise or enlightened. You wake up after death as essentially the same person you were before. Same beliefs, same fears, same limitations. The difference is that those internal states now directly shape your external reality in ways that were buffered by physical matter during life. Preparation matters. Not religious ritual, but genuine spiritual development. Cultivating love, releasing hatred, serving others, seeking truth with humility, living ethically not from fear of punishment, but from understanding of consequence. Message to atheists and skeptics. If you're watching this as a skeptic or atheist, I'm not asking you to suddenly believe everything I've said. I'm asking you to remain open, to consider that certainty in any direction might be premature, to cultivate the qualities that serve you regardless of what awaits after death. Compassion, humility, service, love. If I'm wrong and consciousness does end at death, you've lost nothing by living with kindness. If I'm right, and I can tell you from experience that I am, you'll be grateful you prepared. Final reflection. Looking back at my life now, I see it differently. My atheism wasn't the problem. It was my arrogance. My certainty wasn't the issue. It was my contempt for those who saw differently. My focus on material reality wasn't wrong. It was incomplete. The truth is larger than any philosophy, any religion, any scientific paradigm. It encompasses and transcends them all. And the doorway to experiencing that larger truth isn't belief. It's openness combined with love. Closing call to action. I've shared my journey with you not to convert you, but to invite you into reflection. What are you certain about? What if you're wrong, or what if you're right but incomplete? How would you live differently if you knew with absolute certainty that consciousness continues and that how you live shapes what comes next? Share your thoughts, your questions, your own experiences in the comments. Subscribe to continue this conversation. And most importantly, if this message resonates, share it with someone who might benefit, skeptic or believer, it doesn't matter. Truth speaks to those ready to hear it. Remember, I didn't find God in a church or a temple. I found the divine in darkness, through failure, in the very place I least expected, in the ruins of my own certainty. And that encounter transformed everything. Thank you for walking this journey with me. May your path, whatever it is, lead you toward light, love, and truth.
This video is intended for spiritual and educational purposes only. It does not promote fear, superstition, or religious dogma.